you see it? There.
Fucking thing's hunting us.
Right. New plan.
Can you manage yourself with the gun?
Yes, I fucking can.
Right, this is an F-44 AA pulse rifle. It's rotating breech electronic pulse action. That's what the Colonial Marines used. AA stands for aiming assist.
So, right, you put that under your arm. That's it. Right, this hand here. Aim it towards Andy. Pull the trigger halfway. Don't worry, the safety's on. See? Aiming assistance. If that thing comes towards you, you point it in this general direction, you'll never miss.
Where'd you learn all this?
Games and magazines.
The question of competency in these situations kind of goes out the window when your cast is a bunch of, you know, destitute, downtrodden 20-somethings who really only know what the company needs them to know how to do. You know, and they're just scraping out an existence on this awful, you know, colony world. The slogan "Building Better Worlds" has never felt more disingenuous than in the opening, you know, minutes of Romulus. And Fede Alvarez, you know, he does a really good job of that world building and lore building and like giving you a better sense of what it's like to truly live in this universe. And the whole idea of them just trying to, you know, do some illegal salvage so that they can just get the fuck out, because the main character Rain, you know, she's trying to get the hell off this world. She's done what she needs to do, and arbitrarily they just tack on another 5 years onto her indentured servitude, and you know that, you know, sets up all the stakes for everybody involved. And of course they're going to do something risky, you know, and that's, you know, like everyone loves a good heist, but of course you should probably not go on a derelict Weyland-Yutani science vessel if you're going to do that.
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck, and this is episode 50. Folks, the timing really worked out on this one. There is no better candidate for our featured review today for the big 5-0 episode than the latest entry in the Alien franchise. That's Alien Romulus. This is the first Alien film in 7 years, and it's the first one not directed by a series progenitor, Ridley Scott, in over a decade. This time, it's horror wunderkind Fede Alvarez who's lacing up his space Reeboks, and he's promising a return to the series' horror roots. Does he come through on all the promises that have been made? We're going to see a bit later in the show, and it's not going to be very long now because we've got just a little bit of news, we've got a little watch list, and then we're going to reflect on our thoughts on the rest of the Alien series before we get into our review, because you can tell a lot about a man based on his taste in Alien films. But yeah, Chuck, as I said earlier, we're on the big 5-0 episode. Any thoughts on that? Any reflections on that?
Yeah, you know, it's because we obviously had a pretty long run as from the mezzanine before we were, you know, unceremoniously poached by some Broadway chick from New York City. And I really have taken to our new identity and our new name and kind of what it reflects on what we actually are talking about. And to get past this threshold means a lot, especially since we've cut down from being a weekly feature show to sprinkling in our minisodes in between. So it takes us a little bit longer to get that number higher. And I think it's just a testament to all the hard work we put into this, you know, finding things to watch, finding ways to watch them, as I often struggle with. And yeah, and coming up with compelling content in general. And speaking of that, your part 2 in your Star Trek The Next Generation minisode premiered last week and has been doing, quite well. I do want to note there is a Sub Rosa fan out there who took issue with you, labeling it as one of the worst of the series' like latter half. But yeah, it was very fun to put together, and and I think you were very spot on just in the overall analysis. It was a different era of television. They had to write twice as much as like a typical show does nowadays, and there's lots of hits, but some would argue even more misses, or just ones that are in the middle. And it takes a lot of fortitude to go back to any television show before the golden age of TV, and post Sopranos, I guess you would say, and get as much as you can out of an entire series. It's a lot more work, and it takes just as much effort to get what's rewarding out of it. And your analysis was spot on the virtues of what makes that show as good as and great as it is, and why it's so timeless.
Yeah, I really had a fun time watching it, and thanks for editing that, and thanks to all the people who are watching it, because we've been seeing the numbers going up. People, we're seeing you watching, and we thank everybody who is watching. Both our minisodes and our episodes. So we're seeing the numbers go up.
And on that note, not only should you keep watching to get our accumulated watch time up, but our subscribers as well. We really appreciate that gentleman who left that very genuine and heartfelt comment on our Deadpool Wolverine video, and who hit the subscribe button, because 166 or so, and then live streams become more viable because super chats become a thing, and we can maybe start seeing some shekels coming our way for this hobby of ours. But moving on to what's going on in the news this week. The box office, lots of hot and cold going on. Deadpool and Wolverine naturally finally dethroned The Passion of the Christ and Joker. It's now the most successful R-rated movie of all time. But then we also had some fucking duds. What the hell happened with Borderlands?
Yeah, so this is on its way to being one of the biggest box office bombs ever. In its opening weekend, it made $8.8 million against a budget of $115 million. And it's also one of the worst reviewed movies of the year. Right now, I think it's sitting at 9% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it has a D+ cinema score rating, which if people aren't familiar with, is basically a service that they survey people as they're coming out of the theater, asking them, their thoughts, their opinions, and then they formulate a letter score, basically a grade. And so D+ is pretty bad as far as that stuff goes. I just kind of wanted to talk about this today and turn this on its head a bit and reflect on video game movies as a whole, because I'm not sure what this means for are video games the next big gold rush, as Hollywood sort of seems to think, because of the success of Last of Us sort of started this video game IP gold rush, I think, where now they're trying to license all these video games, and half of them probably aren't even going to get made in the first place, and the stuff that does get made, probably about another half of them isn't even going to be good. So I don't know, what does this mean for the video games as movies as a whole, is just kind of my question. Do you have any thoughts on that idea?
Well, as far as this movie's concerned, it was about 7 years too late. Don't touch this, honey, it'll fall over.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
And the approach was, the production of this is all messed up, because this was an excuse for Cate Blanchett to get out of the house during COVID, and that's pretty much the only reason she took the gig. And this the studio meddling on this was egregious because you hire Eli Roth, the king of schlock, and on paper, he's perfect for a property like this. I've never played these games, but from what I understand, it's very blood and guts. The humor is very adult, and this is definitely not a property for kids. So why in the hell, when you have Deadpool and Wolverine as an example, Deadpool in general as an example, why are you making this a movie for kids, or teenagers? Make this for adults. And because it loses all its bite in the process. But like, not only that, apparently like in the protracted post-production period, Eli Roth was like essentially kicked off, or like he walked away from it and made Thanksgiving, and like just to have something to do because it was more in line with what he wanted to do. And that was a far better movie than I imagine this one is, because it was more true to what he set out to do. But from the beginning, he was gimped because the intention was a PG-13 production. And you put all these like on, I guess, yeah, they're movie stars, but like, are they guaranteed to move the needle when they're basically just playing cardboard cutouts? It's like, I know they were trying to be Guardians of the Galaxy, but it was the wrong approach. And like, there's three prongs to having a video game movie be successful, as we have learned from Mario, I guess. But it's like, is it something that people are still actively playing and interested in? I don't think that's true of Borderlands. Everyone who has played it has moved on to other things. And was it sincere? It really doesn't look like it. It was very token in its approach from what I've seen. And it very much is just a skin suit production. It was just Hollywood taking something it knew to be, relatively popular and just pushing something out. And does it have anything that would bring the normies in? No. From what I understand, it's like you had to have some love for the game to get anything out of this movie. And it failed on all three counts, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this really gives me hope for the general movie-going public's ability to sniff out bullshit and to sniff out a glib, shallow, cash-in. Because, yeah, I mean, you hire Eli Roth, who is not a fit for the project really at all in its current iteration. And then the cast that you have assembled is just the most, like, pull names out of the hat cast ever. And, I don't think that, like, Kate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, Jamie Lee Curtis, these aren't people I would assume who have any particular reverence for the games. Like, I don't think any of them have played them. And then I think the best part is the writers when you look at this, because you hire Last of Us showrunner Craig Mazin to be a writer on this film. And I mean, the only reason they did that was because of how successful that show was. And then the guy campaigns to have his name removed from the credits of the movie, which he successfully did.
Wow.
And on top of that, the only credited screenwriter other than Eli Roth is somebody named Joe Crombie, which is a pseudonym. And so there is a second credited writer on this film who we have no idea who it is.
Some mystery man, some script doctor
who
was just like, I've done my best, but I washed my hands of it.
Yeah, and so, yeah, this really, really gives me hope for the general public and their ability to sniff out bullshit, because that's all this movie was. And, as far as video games being translated into films, video games oftentimes don't have a strong enough plot or characters or writing to warrant making a movie out of.
True.
Because when you play a video game, you're doing it mostly for the gameplay, and that comes first. And so, in fact, I think games are often derivative of films in and of themselves. So when you translate them back into the theatrical format, you're really just reminding people of how, like, derivative these things are in the first place. And this was not a property that warranted that, like something like The Last of Us is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this just never should have been made, and I'm glad that it's not doing well.
See, and that made me think, like, because I'm really reevaluating what video game properties are truly suited for this kind of thing. And,
Mhm.
like, honestly, considering how, like, overall, like, I was positive about the Dungeons and Dragons movie, they need to make a Baldur's Gate movie. Like, maybe
Yeah,
not like
that would be cool.
maybe not like a 1-for-1 from any of the 3 games, but go in that direction. Like, make it more mature, because let's be real, it's all grown-ups who play it predominantly. And yeah, I know you want the kids to get invested too, but like you got to go in a more serious direction. And like and with that, you can do it. And you might as well take advantage of the property that people know. And like on top of that, so like or either that, or I suppose, like you've mentioned it before, Red Dead Redemption is just waiting
Yeah.
for some kind of a movie or TV series adaptation. But we really should be careful what we wish for, because moving on to the watch list here, we have yeah, Scalding. Everything is melting down here in the Crane household.
Oh boy.
But we're doing our best, because next up is the second season of Hot D, House of the Dragon, finished up. And I sniffed out the bullshit like soon after our initial conversation about the premiere, and whoo doggies. Apart from the Battle of Rook's Nest or whatever that was, this season did nothing for me. It was insufferable at times. And that 70-minute finale was a fucking joke. What a joke. I guess. What did you think?
Well, yeah. Again, I'll remind people that I'm someone who hasn't read the book, or at least I'm not familiar with it in the way that you are, and so I found a majority of the season decent enough. I think there are certain plot elements that have me wondering, are we just treading water here? Like, Alicent going on her random camping trips, and Damon just hanging out in a dilapidated castle for an entire season. Stuff like that just has me thinking, maybe this doesn't need to even be 4 seasons as they've announced. Maybe this only needed to be like 3, or, I mean, God, even 2.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, there's just a lot of like really clunky character introductions this season, like namely with the 3 like bastard dragon riders, because those guys all just show up in a random episode and we don't know why. We don't know, like, why are we following these 3 people? And you do eventually, of course, you figure out why by the end of the season, and but by like the second to the last episode. And it makes a little more sense now, but it's still, I mean, they didn't do anything to like, clue you in as to why we were just following these randos for the entire season. And so, yeah, it's a little clunky. I do think that I do still really like episode 1. I thought that was really, really expertly directed, especially that final sequence when the kid dies. And
yeah,
I think that's kind of just what happens when you let a tried and true, HBO stable director, Alan Taylor, who has directed episodes of Game of Thrones, Boardwalk Empire, The Sopranos, Rome, Deadwood. He directed episodes 1 and episode 4 this season, the big battle episode. And then the rest of the season is directed by literal who's, just these fucking rando, like, no experience directors. And you just really see the drop in quality between the episodes. And so that's kind of where I sit, is I really enjoyed episode 1. I really enjoyed episode 4, as you had already mentioned. And then the rest of the season is just like, oh my God, like, how much water can you tread?
And that's the thing. Like, there are, like, each episode has at least one strong scene for me. Like when Alice, like when, what's her name? I can't, I'm already blanking out the season because I was so disappointed in it. But when, like, the 2 female leads, like Alicent and then the
Rhaenyra, right?
when they
Yep.
like have their conversation and Rhaenyra realizes that everything is happening because of a fucking misunderstanding, you know, because like it was just like that was a gut punch, and that was well handled, you know. And like in some of the scenes involving Aemon, like whenever he's on screen, or yeah, like or when Matt Smith is on screen, like for the most part it was powerful stuff. But yeah, like characters just spent the whole season just doing nothing. Like yeah, like he like Damon was just having Luigi's Mansion, haunted house at Harrenhal bullshit happening, like going down on his mom, that kind of, you know, weirdness. But he spent the whole season just, you know, building up to bending the knee to Rhaenyra anyway. You know, like it's like we like, couldn't this have happened a little sooner so that we could have the Battle of the Gullet to end the season? And I know they probably blew their wad, but yeah, like there's just too little substance to the season, and the dialogue is so cringe. You know, like when you actually compare it to, like it's like watching the latter seasons of Game of Thrones when they didn't have the text to truly work with. And I have to, you know, concede, like the this book that it's based on isn't like Game of Thrones. It's written as a history, you know, and you get varying interpretations of the history, and facts change, you know, there's things up to interpretation. And when the reality becomes like, oh, like these people are talking to each other like it's a Disney Channel show, it really diminishes the brand considerably. And yeah, like I don't know. I'm still gonna watch it. I'm sure I'm still gonna like this more than like whatever the Rings of Power season 2 is. Even though I've sworn I won't watch it. You're hungry? Well, we'll get you a sandwich in a second, okay?
Yeah, same. I mean, it's not that big of a commitment all said and done, especially if they're gonna take like literally 2 years in between each season, which doesn't help either. But how do you feel about the 4-season commitment that the showrunner has said? Like, do you think that they have enough material to cover, you know, another half, basically? Because we're basically at the halfway point, if he's to be
Yeah.
believed.
They run the risk of making, if they only did 3 seasons, they would run the risk of rushing it like season 8 of Thrones. They
Okay.
genuinely do have a lot more material to work with. Yeah, and because the reality of it is the climax of the 4th season is kind of gonna, like, the culmination of the conflict is gonna come either in the middle or about 3/4 through, and then they're gonna have to have like 2 or 3 episodes of wrap up to settle everything out. At least, like, that's how I would do it. But knowing them, they're gonna leave the Hour of the Wolf for the last episode and just leave it at that, even though it deserves a lot more. You know, there's a lot more that has to shake out. 1 second, sweetie. And
Yeah,
we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll figure it out in like late 2026 or whenever the next season comes, because yeah, they have not been good about getting this thing out on time, and so yeah, I guess we'll just have to see.
And now moving on, we're gonna kind of close the watch list with a massive retrospective on the Alien series as a whole. Like, I've watched a majority of these movies so much that I didn't feel compelled to go back and rewatch them. But like, what did you glean from your delving back into the lore and the canon, the holy texts that, you know, are these films?
Yeah, so leading up to Romulus this week, I watched Alien, Aliens, Prometheus, and Covenant, and I guess that's a good place to start. Is, you know, as far as an Alien fan goes, I don't really like 3 or 4. I didn't feel compelled to rewatch them. I am one of those people. I mean, one of the big questions people always ask is, are you an Alien fan or an Aliens fan? Because, you know, people always put them next to each other as, this one's the horror movie, this one's the action movie, you know, this one's the Ridley Scott, this one's the James Cameron. And I prefer Alien over Aliens. because I I think Aliens is a bit too long. You know, it's sort of James Cameron getting into his 2.5 hour run times. That's like the point of his career where he's like, no, I need this to be 2.5 to 3 hours, like
Yeah.
all of the rest of his movies have been. And then also, Aliens. Once you start watching it and rewatching it after many times, you start to hang on the little things like I don't think Cameron is a good scriptwriter. I think he's always been serviceable, but never outright good. And there are certain lines in Aliens that I'm just like, ugh, yikes! Like that's not very good as far as just like I don't mean in like a offensive way. I just mean in like oh, that's pretty dodgy writing there,
Yeah.
Cameron. And so yeah, I mean that's kind of where I sit with those. And then specifically for Prometheus and Covenant, I wanted to something to mix them up a bit this time. So I delved into the world of fan edits, of which there are so many for these two movies, and I watched the Chaos editions, which are probably the most famous fan edits of Prometheus and Covenant, and they essentially edit in a lot of the deleted scenes back into the movies and also the movie's marketing materials, like the viral marketing, which included like webisodes and like a weird, like a Peter Whalen TED talk,
Yeah.
because that was when Prometheus came out. That was when like TED talks were like booming, and then also a bunch of Whalen Yutani commercials, like fake commercials, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really fun. I will say I'm a mild Prometheus apologist, I would say, in
Yeah.
that um, Damon Lindelof was coming off the finale of Lost when that movie came out, and people fucking hated that guy. And people hated that the movie was PG-13 too. Oh my god, I remember how much people
Was it PG-13?
fucking yeah, Prometheus is PG-13.
Wow.
And you wouldn't think it is. Yeah, you wouldn't think it is because of, I mean, most notably the surgery, the C-section scene. But yeah, that is a PG-13 movie. And people like were ready to riot when they found that out. And so, yeah, that movie had a lot working against it. And I think, watching it, what are we now? 12 years later or whatever. I think it's better than people give it credit for. I do like the David stuff. I love all the David stuff in both of those movies. I think Fassbender's performance is awesome. And yeah, I've talked enough though right now. Let's get your sort of
Yeah.
let's get you in on this.
Because I saw Aliens before I saw Alien. My aunt and uncle, Jan and Steve, we were visiting them in Bismarck when I was like 8 years old. And the kids were sent downstairs to watch Ants on repeat. Because like that was the new hotness for some reason. A Woody Allen kids movie. And the grown-ups were, and the teenagers were upstairs watching the 2-tape VHS edition of Aliens. And I remember my mom having to like run away from it and like come hide like on the stairwell because it was freaking her out so much because she hadn't seen it since she saw it in the theaters. And ever since then, like it had a mystique to it. And that's the first one I sought out when we got Netflix. And I saw Alien much later, but Alien is the one I've seen in theaters myself during one of the revival showings that they do at your multiplex, and it holds up so good. It is such like that first movie has something that like not until Prometheus did it have it, that cosmic horror vibe. Like that truly like you are in an unknown situation, you don't know what's going to happen next. And that's and this carries over throughout all the movies. It's like what to expect in Aliens. How bad it can get. And Cameron's just trying to like one up the scenarios to amplify the thing he's doing, which is an action movie. And and that was very effective, and I hold Aliens in high esteem. But like having like that's like a Sunday afternoon movie. especially if you're watching the extended cut of it that has all the Hadley Hope content added back in, where like where you see the colony beforehand. But like, I love the world building, and and I love the dystopian space universe that exists in this, that's hinted at in all of them to a degree, or like outright front and center. But yeah, like I agree with you that the only movies that truly matter like are that Aliens, Prometheus, Covenant, sort of trajectory. Everything else is just slop, and it should be treated as such, especially the Alien vs Predator movies. I have a soft spot for that first one, but it's just ridiculous. And the second one is the Strauss brothers just going full, effect horror gore gonzo shit, like the whole thing about like all the pregnant women in the hospital getting, like having chest burster seeds just vomited into their mouths. Like I like, it made me more uncomfortable, but like there's nothing to it. It's like I watched the trailer for it again while I was getting this all together, and oh god, like movie advertising back then was so bad. Like they were still using narrators, and like they were like doing all this like setup for like the small town, like present day, like, oh, here's a military mom coming home from war type bullshit. And yeah, like they lost the plot. Like they're so far afield from what truly makes these movies, the franchise, what it is in the public consciousness. And it's you can only just you use the heavy lifting by Scott and Giger so much before it's just watered down tripe. And but like in support of that, beyond the films, there's a couple YouTubers like Film Comics Explained and Alien Theory that I have been following for a really long time. When I was a night auditor at a hotel, they were often the only things keeping me awake, because they were like Alien Theory in particular, because he does these like audiobook renditions of the Alien Earth War comic books, like series, and it is so good. Like it just like, that's a lost era, the Dark Horse comic book era, like that stuff was so solid, and it was compromised by the shitty movies like Alien 3, because like Hicks and Newt were like the primary characters of that series, and Ridley coming back was a big deal. And then they had to retroactively rename those characters in all of their works because they killed them off in the movie. And like, that's annoying shit to have to deal with, but seek that kind of stuff out. I've never read the books, because like there's a lot of different things out there. Like you get some insight into like the colonial marines, like bug hunts, if you read some of those. But yeah, overall, I want to shout out, I'm glad you mentioned the Chaos Edition stuff. I had never heard of that. And like, I also like, I went down the rabbit hole a little bit. I couldn't watch them completely, but they're like, I salute those motherfuckers, because that's so much work, and like they put so much thought into it, and it really shows you like how, like what can be gained by having more people in the editing bay recontextualizing a work, and how it can improve it, or bring out something that wasn't there in the released product. Because yeah, the Prometheus especially, like I was bought in, I was hyped as fuck during the lead up, so I watched all of that content, and I was super into it and invested in it. And then the movie came out, and I was one of those people who was really like, my euphoria wore off quickly, and I was really I was really dragged down by all the people nitpicking it. But like you, I've watched it almost like the most, other than the first two movies, out of all of them, because there is so much promise there, and its ideas are so expansive and worth revisiting. And that's why Covenant was so disappointing for me. It shouldn't, like, they tried to mush an Alien sequel into a Prometheus sequel when never the twain should they have met. You know, like there needed to be separation because they neither could stand upright and stride because they were fumbling over the different length of the legs because like each one does different things, and that's kind of the thing. What, like, and this will carry over into my comments about Romulus, but the AI characters, like, it's so interesting to me that Scott is so fascinated by that concept, because like they asked him on the red carpet for Romulus what his top 4 movies were, and one of them was Blade Runner. And because like he's really proud of that movie, and you almost get the sense that like everything with Ian Holmes' character, whose name the character's name I'm blanking on. What the fuck was that character's name? Ash. Like, from beginning with Ash, like, it's just been this preoccupation of his with his sci-fi projects. And like, why do you think that is? Like, what is the appeal behind that?
I think it's just all of the really interesting questions, the ethical and the moral questions around androids and robots, and, you know, just the way in which you can pretty much shove any sort of like morality lesson or any sort of like philosophy lesson that you want to in one of those characters' mouths, because they are constantly trying to understand the world around them, or, you know, sort of understand it through the characters that are surrounding them. Because one of the really interesting things that I like about Prometheus is Noomi Rapace is like confronted with basically definitive proof that God doesn't exist, and how she deals with that, because her character is like religious, like she wears that cross, and sort of her conversations with David, you know, occasionally surround that idea, and they didn't mind that nearly, you know, good enough. They should have went a lot more into that idea. But yeah, it's just all these really interesting philosophical and religious and sociology questions that, you know, come from this idea of androids existing.
And I guess that's maybe why the reaction to Prometheus was, you know, so mixed. People wanted that Alien sequel. They didn't want to think. They should have gone further into the question of faith and religion, because like it was kind of trite. You got a cardboard tube samurai over here, and it didn't go far enough, especially since like that was the core idea, and that's the thing. The Prometheus side of Covenant was what I was there for. I didn't really care for the pseudo Alien sequel that they made, you know, because like every main protagonist must be a female. She must be a badass bitch at some point, you know, and in the guy that, what's his name? Crudup. Is that Billy Crudup?
Yeah, Billy Crudup.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like, cause he was the Shaw equivalent in Alien Covenant, and he just winds up birthing the alien at the end. And what, honey?
Yeah,
go ahead.
He's so insufferable in that movie. Oh my God. Just his character is such like just constantly trying to take control. I found him so insufferable in a good way, not in like he did it on purpose, I think.
And he was more of a antagonistic force, you know, than anything. But I guess it begs the question, like, and this is just a broader comment on the tropes of all these movies. Is it a prerequisite for these characters to be quote unquote stupid, you know, like, or to like make dumb decisions? Is that present in the first one?
I guess, well, the thing that always is sort of the downfall of these movies is the idea that the characters have to split up. and that all seems to always happen, even though it's like uniformly a bad idea. And that even happens in the first Alien, and it's just so you can get the characters alone, so you can have a really tense scene where, you know, they're trying to run away from the alien or they're trying to hide from the alien. And so yeah, I think it kind of is a bit, but I think your success in, you know, having these characters be stupid but not being so blatant about it is the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful Alien movie, because that is Covenant's downfall. Is
Yeah.
when there is a point of delineation in Covenant where the movie goes from being like pretty good to absolute shit. And it's when, I don't even know the character's name, because I don't even know if she's given one, but it's when they are in like David's house thing, or the temple thing, and that unnamed like woman character goes, "I'm gonna go clean up," and she like goes off, and she like for some reason feels the need to like go and like wash her face or something, and that's when she gets killed off. But that is like the point at which that movie becomes shit. And it's just how well you can have these characters, you know, it's how well that you can make these characters split up and make dumb decisions but not being so overt about it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the first two movies, any like quote unquote dumb decision, like bringing yeah, I just suck at remembering the names of the characters. John Hurt's character, the man with the face hugger.
Yeah.
Yeah, with like
I don't remember either. Yeah.
Bringing him back on the ship, like that is the company working in its best interests through Ash, and all of the poor, you know, military doctrine in Aliens is attributable to, yet again, the company's intentions. And yeah, and the company is noticeably absent from Covenant in that regard. And in Prometheus, the company's just letting all of these, you know, scientists who should be smarter than they are make very troubling decisions. And like, there's lots of inconsistency with the minor characters, like those two, that like Fifield and the other guy, the biologist, who should know better than to try and approach the weird snake thing. You know what I mean? Like there's like, yeah. And like, yeah. And splitting off unnecessarily, like that kind of like that was just plot convenience and contrivance. Ultimately, they needed to have a monster show up at some point, so why not Fifield and just have him be black good? And yeah, I think we're kind of at the point when it's time to start talking about Romulus, if you're ready to.
I think so.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in keeping with, you know, like some of my, you know, comments that I teased previously, the question of competency in these situations kind of goes out the window when your cast is a bunch of, you know, destitute, downtrodden 20-somethings who really only know what the company needs them to know how to do, you know, and they're just scraping out an existence on this awful, you know, colony world. The slogan "Building Better Worlds" has never felt more disingenuous than in the opening, you know, minutes of Romulus. And Fede Alvarez, you know, he does a really good job of that world building and lore building, and like giving you a better sense of what it's like to truly live in this universe. And the whole idea of them just trying to, you know, do some illegal salvage so that they can just get the fuck out, because the main character, Rain, you know, she's trying to get the hell off this world. She's done what she needs to do, and arbitrarily they just tack on another 5 years onto her indentured servitude. And, you know, that, you know, sets up all the stakes for everybody involved. And of course they're going to do something risky, you know, and that's, you know, like everyone loves a good heist, but of course you should probably not go on a derelict Weyland-Yutani science vessel if you're going to do that. And, you know, the thing about this movie that like I in parts enjoyed and in parts got annoyed by was how it literally just is. It's like a cover song where an artist, where like someone is, yeah, giving you exactly what you want. They're playing a song you like, but then they add in their own little, like frills, and they put their stank on it when you know how the song should sound. But when you have like this movie literally beginning the same way as Alien with all the boot up sequence, like all the sound design is the same, all of the production, the lo-fi high tech stuff looks just like it did in Alien, and then you see a great undermining occur of the central text of all of this. In the Ripley did not kill that alien. Sorry to spoil that for you. It's kind of implied, but like I was pissed off at that fact, but I was enjoying how it was delivered to me. But from there, Romulus was mostly effective. I was rolling with it and on board with it until, it kind of just trips on itself in trying to add things in from other movies that, aren't new. Like the stuff that it brings to the table that's fresh, I enjoyed, but I'm not so sure that we needed to have those Prometheus elements get added back in. I know it made for a more interesting finale. Yeah, go ahead. Ugh. But yeah, it at the same time, it would like make my heart race and pump, and then it would whelm me the next instant. And at times it's a skin suit movie, but then when it's like truly giving you something exciting, like the everything involving the countdown to them crashing into the rings of the planet, that was original and thrilling stuff, and they really maximized their budget there. But there are areas where it's just like, oh, like why are you doing it like this? And where like you expect to see something more out of like a tunnel full of aliens. The performance of like the cinematography and the editing just was a letdown when it should have been at its like tightest and its peak. And I was almost left wondering, wait, how did we get here when it cuts from thing to thing? But overall, I have to recommend this. This is just it's like at level or like a rung above or below Prometheus for me. And it's miles ahead of like other films in the series that were definitely quite middling and not worth revisiting. I definitely watch this again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. I'm think this is a mostly successful entry, and it's really at its best when it's carving its own path and it's adding to the lore. It's putting in, moments of originality, and it's at its worst when it's trying to emulate other movies.
God,
and
yes. One moment in particular that we'll get to,
Yeah. There are times where this movie like really struck me as like The Force Awakens for the Alien franchise, where they're just putting something in front of you because it makes the fanboys point at the screen like Leonardo DiCaprio and go, I recognize that. But then there are times where it's doing, really, really interesting things, especially with this movie does the most with the alien acid blood than any other movie. Like this movie is fixated on alien acid blood for like a lot of its runtime, and I loved that. And so, yeah, I mostly like this also. Just to get it out of the way, I really got to say that these sequels need to stop with the undermining of previous films, because it's happening so often now that our this review and then our last review, which was Deadpool and Wolverine, these movies that are undermining the previous films in their series, it's happening so often that we're reviewing 2 movies in a row that do this, because Deadpool and Wolverine undermine Logan, and then this movie tries to undermine the original Alien, and it's like, why is this happening so often now? And it's just it's so annoying. I get so annoyed by this, and that was probably because this movie retroactively makes Alien worse, because now every time that you watch Alien, it's like you see that alien, get jettisoned out of the spaceship, and in the back of your mind, oh, it's not really dead. It's gone for, that alien's going to float through space for 20 years or whatever and then be picked up. And so, yeah, I hate when these movies feel the need to do that, because it is possible to do a sequel without undermining the previous movies in your franchise. But yeah, I mean, this movie does a lot of callbacks, and I think that they sort of waffle between being mildly amusing and just being sort of eye roll worthy. And I think that's probably a good place to actually start our review in earnest, is with the Rook, I think is his name, aka the Ash deep fake, which is like mega uncanny valley. They should have never tried to do that, or if they were going to try and do this, they should have done it in a way where they didn't have to rely so much on like deep fake technology, where you could have just as easily made his face more damaged, or you could have made his skin ripping off of his face or something like that. But they had to make it, Ian Holm, the CGI Ian Holm. And so, yeah,
they could have just put a latex makeup mask on somebody. The deep fake was, it was so unconvincing. It was bad. It was really, really bad. And like, he died in 2020, well before this was ever greenlit in production. So it's definitely not, it's probably like they cut a deal with his estate and just analyzed his voice, but they could have done something more convincing visually. Every time Rook showed up, I was like, I recoiled. Even though like I understood and welcomed the role he had in the story, it was upsetting after a while. And to play devil's advocate for the return of the original Alien, or at least the surviving of it, it kind of makes sense that the perfect organism would have some way to encase itself in some kind of a space sarcophagus, so that eventually it would land somewhere or be picked up, so that it could continue the life cycle of the species, in that evolutionary sort of tract. But yeah, it's insufferable, for them to do it like this. Like they could have come up with something different. But it's all about where you place this movie in the timeline. Why not put this thing after Aliens, and say that, oh yeah, we went back to LV426 and we managed to find some trace DNA or something, there's something that survived the nuclear blast. But then that would.
Well, I'm glad they didn't feel, at the very least, they didn't feel the need to actually put the original Alien in the movie as like a character, because it is kind of funny that they get onto the space station and then that alien is like crucified on the ceiling with the harpoon intact in its torso. I'm glad that they decided to just make it already have been killed by the space station inhabitants or whatever. But yeah, I mean, what did you think about all the other like callbacks? Did any of them like bother you, or did you think they were mostly fine? I mean, there's stuff, there's stuff from very, very little. They have the toy bird thing that like dunks its beak in the water, and they have, shouts out to Peter Wayland, and there's a part where there's a picture of Harry Dean Stanton on one of the computer screens. But yeah, what did you think of all the callbacks? Did any of them in particular, either bother you or sort of get your your fanboy juices going, or what?
Yeah, I alluded to some of it, and it's the startup sequence, the mother, in the beginning. I that got me right, centered and in the mood. But then, and I like the idea that all Wayland Yutani colonies just have these stupid dunking birds. They just mass produce this shit and ship it around the galaxy. But the worst thing that they could have done was have the most insipid interpretation of "get away from her, you bitch." That line delivery was terrible. It reminded me of the Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. "You're a teacher? Part-time." Like that moment. That's kind of what it was, but even worse. Just that you didn't have a better take. Did it have to be like that? But it's because the character reverted to his childlike, deteriorating form, and I guess they held true to that in that moment when they really shouldn't have. I'm glad you noted the phone save station from Alien Isolation. That was a nice add-in, because it's a reminder. All that is canon, and that's the kind of thing that Alien fanboys will at. And there was other things where it's like why do this? And I guess that brings us to, good job, the major plot point of this movie. What were they doing in this facility? And it's all about synthesizing the black goo and and tying it all back to what David did. But it begs the question, where the fuck is David? Where the fuck is, what was David doing this whole time? So I still feel like we need that story to be completed sometime in the future, especially if they're going to be introducing it in, from somebody else, to have Fede Alvarez use it in the way he did. Okay.
Yeah, you could have just as easily, I was going to mention this earlier when we were talking about the Ash character, but you could have just as easily have made the Ash character a, Michael Fassbender android, whether that be, it doesn't have to necessarily be David, but it can be one of those variants. And I'm sure the only reason they didn't do it is because Michael Fassbender probably wants nothing to do with these movies anymore. But
especially if Ridley Scott's not involved,
Yeah. But you could have done that also. And but yeah, you had mentioned the space station, or the Romulus and Remus, which is sort of what the title of the movie even refers to, which I didn't know. I knew it was Romulus and Remus, but I didn't know it was a space station. And I think this idea is really cool, this sort of dual space station that's connected by a couple of bridges in the middle. And I just have to shout out the production design and the set decoration in this was so good. I give credit to them. I give credit to Fede Alvarez for sort of putting his foot down on wanting to do practical sets, because a majority of the sets, other than the stuff that was set out in space, a majority of the sets in this movie are all practical, everything. And so you can really tell that, it's a real place, all these rooms that they're going to, all these labs that they're going into. And I really thought the production design was immaculate. Yeah. And the computer displays, you already mentioned the sort of retro futurism. I think it's, what is it called? Cassette futurism or something like that. And I'm glad they didn't go with the hologram displays that Prometheus did, because then you introduce all these questions, the same questions that arise with Star Wars and then the prequel Star Wars movies, where it's why are all the movies that are set in the past, why do they all have better technology than the movies that are set in the future? And
Yeah,
this movie kind of splits the difference really well.
and I guess I have a lore, like answer, like I guess my own head canon, but
Hmm.
the everything we're seeing in Prometheus and Covenant is the state of the art, projects. Like these are the main priorities of the company, and the stuff from like the mining ship that's probably been commissioned for hundreds of years probably,
Sure. Yeah.
and the same with like all the stuff on these colonies. It's like they're just dumping the baseline models that they need out there, and everything else is just the lower tier. It's like there's the caste system of this corporate hellhole, is on display just in that, like what kinds of technology are available to them. Because like, if you look at the guns that they had on that station with the auto targeting versus like what the Marines have in Aliens, even the grunts are just getting the bare minimum, and are making do with less, compared to probably what is definitely available to the company on a limited basis. And yeah, but either way,
I like that.
but the return to that, is welcome. It makes it sense. It makes it feel more like a proper Alien movie, as because that's what made Prometheus kind of feel janky. Because it's like, well, this is how many decades before the first Alien movie. Like, how do you square that circle? And like, I guess that's how I do it. But let's talk about the cast in general.
Yeah.
The disposable characters, were some of the most especially that British dirtbag deserved to die, and Navarro deserved to die, for abandoning their friends. But of course, they rightly believed that, God, what's his name, Andy was going to do something, to them because, spoiler, he gets Rook's like programming disk put into him, which rewrites his priorities and makes him smarter, but then also makes him, not necessarily trustworthy. And like, I liked the Kaylee Spaney's character having to grapple with the reality that this person who had been slavishly devoted to her, suddenly may not have her best interests in mind, and having to confront that. But for the most part, I really didn't like some of those, the young cast. I couldn't understand what they were saying sometimes. Like I wish, like I look forward to having subtitles when I watch this again, because then at the very least I could discern some of what's going on in the, like, when like the British kid is speaking. It's like, did he have to be so gutter mouthed? Like, can we find some way to make him understandable? It's like, it was worse than Bane for me at times. And maybe I'm just hard of hearing now, but yeah, I found that problematic. And I was grateful that he took his acid bath and left the movie.
Yeah, no, you're definitely on point there. I was in the same boat. They were definitely chaving up that British guy like to the max. He was just like, yeah, British dirtbag in space for some reason. They probably didn't need the even the guy who I thought was gonna turn into like the love interest, who just also dies unceremoniously. He had a bit of a British accent that was at times hard to understand, but yeah, the cast is mostly disposable, as oftentimes the casts are in these films. Kaylee Spaney, I guess, is fine. She does a okay job in sort of the Ripley role, but I don't know how much this movie was actually trying to sell that, she's supposed to be a badass to me, because it just seemed like she was mostly bumbling her way around, getting lucky at times, and then at other times just being led around by an android. And so I don't know, maybe she was a bit miscast. I don't know if I really bought, a 5'1", 100-pound girl as a badass anyways. And so I made the comment in our Google Doc that I would like to see like a Katie O'Brien in this role, like a muscly, like, sort of yeah, Vasquez type person, because you get a lot more of that nowadays with women in Hollywood. You see a lot more of that, a lot more very, very fit women, and so I would have liked to have seen that, I think. And I do want to shout out Andy though.
Yeah.
The guy who played him, the
Best
actor
character in the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the actor, his name's David Johnson, and he really did a good job, especially with portraying the differences between, as his prime directive changed. And I thought he did a really, really good job. And I mean, the androids are always the most interesting parts of these movies and are the meatiest roles, I would say. And so he did a good job with that. But
he had the most to work with, and it showed. And God, all of his terrible jokes, like
those were bad.
Those were real bad, but they're, I guess, supposed to be. But they didn't need to do it as often as they did. And on the note of Katie O'Brien, they need to, if this was the Alien inspired modern sequel, I want an Aliens inspired sequel with her as the centerpiece to it. I want a bug hunt movie, and I know that maybe that should just go straight to streaming, because we should be fucking thankful that this went to theaters, shouldn't we?
Yeah, it was Hulu originally, direct to Hulu. Yep.
And what do you think made them change their mind?
I think it was the fact that theaters opened up better than they thought they were going to, because the pre-production of this movie started when the pandemic was sort of on its tail end. And I think it was originally, they were going to do the same thing that they did with Predator, because with the last Predator movie, and they saw that, people actually did come back to theaters, and, you could make your budget back by doing that. And I'm glad they did, because this movie, to kind of transition us a bit, this movie is reportedly cost $80 million, which is, I want to note, $35 million less than Borderlands, $120 million less than the Flash movie, and it looked so good, in my opinion. This movie is a extraordinary use of budget when 80 million is nothing these days. And, all of those space shots, all of those shots of the planetary rings, the 0G sequences that you could tell that they were actually, they were filming it in a way that was practical, that, all the actors were on actual rigging instead of just doing CG. I thought for the most part, other than the notable exception of the Ash face, the blend of digital and practical effects I thought was done really, really well. And you already talked about it, but the scene in which the British dirtbag dies and all the acid is dripping on him, and he holds up his hand and his fingers are melting away, I thought that was really, really well done. That was obviously CG, but it was done in a way that was very, very well done. So yeah, I have to commend them on that.
And the design, of the alien's cocoon, it just being this acidic vagina,
wall vagina.
That was that. I really got a kick out of that, because that's the thing, and that's what's kind of missing from the more middling, entries in this franchise. You have to have that psychosexual horror aspect to it. Like when the face hugger is on the British dirtbag and it's almost getting in his mouth with its, plunger, penis. God, those moments were great. And all of the skittering face huggers, this fucking station was overrun. And and they did give us things we haven't seen before, having a mass deployment of these horrors, and in the problem solving, the idea of, well, let's just raise the room's temperature to our body temperature, and they probably won't be able to find us, until they do, obviously. But and that's what, like, when this movie was cooking, like them trying to like problem solve, trying to get through the death trap that Rook had created by like shutting and locking the station down and everything. It like that stuff was very effective. Let's see.
Yeah, the movie it's weirdly set piece driven where we talked earlier in the episode about video game movies, and this movie is weirdly video gamey where characters are moving from location to location and they're sort of picking up new objectives, and the movie could be like divvied up in these sort of set pieces because you have the body temperature set piece, as you alluded to. You have my personal favorite, the acid blood 0G scene. You have the elevator scene where the xenomorph literally catches her like a bride or something, like, with its tail.
Oh yeah, and like initially I was like, why did it spare her when it literally speared her ex-boyfriend like 10 minutes ago? And it's because it knew facehuggers were coming, and it was like, we got to make more. Like it wanted to serve her up, and because she wasn't a threat. She didn't have a gun, so like there is some internal logic to the aliens' behavior that isn't just plot contrivance. And I guess we might as well just break the seal here and talk about the last 15 minutes, because that was balls to the wall. And like as soon as the pregnant, like the ex-boyfriend's sister, like Kay, I think her name is, as soon as she like succumbs to the desire to not bleed out and she injects herself with the black goo, I was just like, this is not going to end well. I've seen Prometheus. I know what's coming, but I didn't expect what happened. Like when you see that egg open up, like, first of all, that birthing sequence was horrific. Like in every sense, like it made me die inside. Cause like I've been up front and like I've seen childbirth, obviously, as you can, hear my son possibly screaming behind me. But good God, when that egg opened up and you see that baby, and for a moment she just pauses and she's like, wait, I can't kill this thing. It's a child, because it looks like it elicits that evolutionary sympathy that we all have programmed into us for things that look like us. And then of course it just turns into a like the fact that, like, imagine an alien that can actually smile at you as it's about to like suck the blood out of you like a vampire. Like, what did you make of the alien xenomorph hybrid? Like, it's almost like an engineer, like a weird fusion of engineer, human, and alien.
Yeah, and that makes sense because it is derived from the black goo rather than being derived from like a face hugger, and so it makes sense that it would look like that. And it looked to me like I always wonder because Fede Alvarez, of course, I believe is Spanish, and when you look at the monsters that are in Spanish horror movies, a lot of times they look very similar, because I think about what the monster looked like in the movie Wreck, or Record, or however you pronounce it. That guy who did that movie was Spanish. I think about the Pale Man from Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. And I think about the, I can't remember the name of the director who did it, but the Spanish horror movie Mama.
Yeah.
The monster from that. And they all look the same. They all look like these gangly, tall, like white, gross things that are played by like former like basketball players. Like this was, this movie was, I can't remember his name, but yeah, the monster in this movie was played by like a 7'7" former basketball player. And
was it Bull? That'd be really funny.
I can't remember. I know he's a white guy, but I just can't remember his name. But yeah, they all look very similar, and it's kind of the same for this, where this movie, he's the incredibly tall version, incredibly lanky version of an engineer, basically. And yeah, I really, really like that. Earlier you were talking about how gross stuff was, and it was so disgusting when the pregnant girl, she like checks her like boob and she's lactating the like black goo, and then later on when the engineer gets his hands on her, I think it's implied that he was breastfeeding, right?
Oh,
During that scene.
I thought he was at her neck, but no, I think you're right. I think his appendage was just having a little drink to like get to complete the process. Oh, that's fucking twisted. And we will shout out the performer. His name is Robert Bob Rotsky. So his name is Bob. Robert Bobrovsky. Okay. So he's like Robert, son of Bob, or something like that.
But yeah, that was good. I liked all that. You know, I'm just glad that, you know, they didn't completely abandon Prometheus and Covenant with all of this black goo stuff and the bastardized engineer, because they could have just as easily have done that and thrown those movies just completely out the window. And I'm glad there's something in there from them. And
yeah, and that, like, my initial annoyance to the black goo was cured with that finale. It's like it rationalized itself, and it just make like. Do you think Rook knew what would happen? He only showed them the video of the mouse reanimating. You know what I mean? Like he must have known that it would birth something terrible, right?
Yes, yeah, most certainly, because I think he purposely, I don't know, I'd have to see the movie again, but I think he purposefully like stopped the video before it got to the part where the mouse like explodes. And so, yeah, I think he definitely knew what was going to happen, because, you know, he was the science officer. So he was most certainly there when that mouse did explode. He was there in person. He saw that happen, I'm sure. And so, yeah, he definitely knew.
Because obliquely, the purpose is to try and evolve humanity so that it can survive on these shoddy terraformed planets that they keep creating, you know, more readily. But God, like is the like, and I think the other aspect of it is they want to create like a drone-like species out of humanity, where there's like a central, like, the nexus of control over all of them that like they'll make the masses subservient to.
Oh, most certainly, yeah. I mean, I think that in some ways, Ash has the same sort of predilections that David does in some ways, where I think he is most certainly acting on behalf of the company, but then he's also acting a little bit on his own curiosity. And you see that in the first Alien, where he is definitely a curious guy. He wants to know what's going to happen. And so I think that he just wants to see what's going to happen. He doesn't care about the human cost. You know, he's a lot like David in those ways.
And yeah, like with the ending, it did end a little insipidly. The I didn't really care for how abrupt her like cryolog was. She didn't give nearly enough detail about her experiences. Because like if I were her, I'd be like giving like a full accounting of being like, hey, I'm the last survivor. This is what fucking happened. Wayland Yutani is like purposely breeding monsters, and we should all be scared that we're out in space right now. And instead she's just like, hopefully I get where I'm going, signing off. And then I did like how the ship lights just go black and we just lose sight of it in the vastness of space. That was a nice touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The ending is definitely very sudden, and but I do give them credit for ending it in a way that doesn't leave any sort of sequel bait. You know, no, there was no after credit scene. There was no cliffhanger. They haven't prematurely announced a second movie, and so for the time being, this movie sort of, you know, stands on its own a little bit. And but there is something that is next, and I wanted, before we kind of close out the episode here, I did want to get your thoughts on Noah Hawley's Alien Earth which is a Hulu series. What do you think about that?
Hate it. Hate it.
It is okay.
Yeah, because like we've been discussing, if this is set before the first Alien movie, how are the aliens on Earth?
Yeah. I mean, that is the central question, I think. And
Did they?
I guess the success.
Did they find another predator pyramid? Like, are we gonna go there?
God.
Like, what the fuck are we doing? What what in the ever living fuck are we doing? And I guess this is a trend, not just here, but it's present in other franchises and properties. You know, because look at Star Wars and the Acolyte. They have no desire, and even the Mandalorian, they have no desire to go forward into the future. They think it's a safer choice to retreat into the past, and it is not a safer choice creatively, because anything you do is just going to harm what came before. They're not going to do it with care. They're not going to do it with, even I respect Noah Hawley. I generally appreciate the man's work, but I don't think he's a good fit for this, especially when they are inevitably just going to poison the well further by doing so, and I don't appreciate it. Yeah, I don't appreciate it one bit.
Yeah, because I mean, it's either there are sort of two routes you can go with it. Either aliens are on Earth, in which case you have to explain it, and you have to explain it in a way that is satisfying, or this show that is called Alien Earth never even has an alien in it, ever, and it's just kind of
stupid, They might as well call it Prometheus 3, the series. You know what I mean? Because then you could explain it. Have David show back up and be like, and just bring it home in that way. Mm-hmm. But how can you set it where you've set it in the timeline? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, not really sure. I mean, I think I do also respect Noah Hawley. I have a great deal of respect for him, and I think there are worse people that could be attached to this, but I think that in some ways he has that sort of, I don't know, I guess I would call it like a Rian Johnson disregard for anything that the fans want, where Noah Hawley is just going to do whatever he wants, and he doesn't give a shit what anyone has to say. I think he kind of did that a bit with his last sort of IP-driven project, which was Legion, the show that was ostensibly an X-Men show, but really had nothing to do with X-Men or Marvel or in any way. And I think he's going to try and do the same thing with this, where this show is a alien show, I guess, but I don't think has any interest in really doing any actual alien IP stuff with it. He's gonna do whatever he wants with it, and I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat. I am looking at this with a very skeptical eye.
And as I consider it more, the only way that this works is, if what it is Weyland Yutani back on Earth taking stock of the events of Prometheus and Covenant and being like, okay, all right, there's something cool out there. Why don't we redirect, find some way to redirect this mining ship that's nearby the system that we have the coordinates for, so they can just go see what's there. That mm-hmm. would be the, and that would have to come at the end. Or if it's it would just be the whole Alien franchise from Weyland Yutani's perspective. Otherwise, what are we doing?
It's going to be like a boardroom drama. It's going to be a Succession, but with Weyland Yutani, basically, is what they'll try and do. They're going to try and do the bureaucracy parts of Star Wars Andor, basically, is what could happen.
And that could either work out really well or, be exactly as we are doomsaying, which is a colossal waste of everyone's time. But Romulus is not that. Romulus, you should go see. Encourage them to make more movies like this, just in terms of their ambition and their execution. You know, because this could have been really bad. And my expectations, I must say, were quite low going in. But seeing it all play out, it was well worth my time and my money, which I can't say about many things in theaters these days. You know, especially if the product is like Borderlands or whatever that Blake Lively movie is. Moving on to the mentionables, we have a book and a podcast to talk about, or at least a short story collection by Stephen King. What did what do you make of its wares?
Yeah, so this past week, my wife and I took a sort of mini vacation to the north shore of Lake Superior, and we spent a lot of time just sitting on the beach. And I did a lot of reading, and so one of the things that I picked up was the latest offering from Stephen King, short story collection here. You Like It Darker. I really like Stephen King. I know that I'm not on social media all that much, but I know that he's like really insufferable on Twitter, I've heard these days. But I like his writing.
Who isn't?
And
the last 7 years,
yeah.
like the last 9 years, just broke everyone on the internet in that regard.
Yeah. But I still really like his writing, and this is no different, especially his short story collections. You know, I've been in the bag for all of his, older short story stuff for the longest time. And this is no different. This was a really good collection. I like how he a lot of times will like sort of sneak in like undercover sequels to his older stuff. And one of the short stories in this book is sort of a not quite sequel, like secret sequel to Cujo.
That's interesting.
It's very, very interesting. And so I like when he does that. And of course, everything that he does is oftentimes set in Maine because he's from there. And it's more specifically, a lot of times it's set in Castle Rock, which is his sort of weird, Erie, Indiana type city that's in Maine. And yeah, I thought I really enjoyed this. And, I didn't put this on the doc, but I just wanted to give it a shout out because I know this is very close to your heart. But another book that I started reading finally, I will add, is the Authority here. And so I didn't quite get through the first this is the first hardcover. I think this is the first 12 issues. I haven't quite gotten through it, but yeah,
the Warren Ellis
really
era.
like.
That's its finest hour. The Mark Millar, sections, are a lot more, to his extremes, but they're still worth reading. But the Warren Ellis stuff is, it's peak. It's peak. So I'm glad you picked that up. And I need to give Stephen King's short stories more of a try, because I looked up and read, God, what was it called? The Dreamers, or like something like that. The one about about people being experimented on to try and like dream of a house and go inside and try and find out like what's in the basement.
Yeah, that was in this one. Yeah.
Fuck, that was good.
That was one of the best ones. Yeah, that one was great. And there's another one called The Answer Man in this one that is really good. But yeah, if you haven't read or if you have only read a couple of his short stories, go back to the older stuff, because that, Night Shift and then Nightmares and Dreamscapes, those are probably his best ones, because those were when Stephen King was in like full on like cocaine mode, when he was still, doing lines, and he was still like drinking an eighth of Jack Daniels every night. And so yeah, those are the best ones.
You're on this. Bear with me here. I have a little girl who wants to do silly faces. There you go. There we go. Now happiness. Yeah. All right. And my mentionable here. Yeah. As I advance through here, the YouTube algorithm, thanks to some people who are doing like re-uploads and edits to it, are taking stuff from the Video Archives podcast, and making YouTube content out of it. But now I've gone and like get back and listened to the podcast proper, you know, and that's Quentin Tarantino and his Pulp Fiction writing partner Roger Avery, and I guess they both worked at the Video Archive store, and it because after it closed, Tarantino just bought it lock, stock, and barrel and recreated it in a room in his house. So he has all these VHS tapes, and they just sit down and watch these old tapes, and then they talk about it. And the show is kind of like produced by Avery's daughter Gala, you know, and she contributes commentary to it. And it's very enjoyable. They talk about some weird, obscure movies that I've never heard of, like Night of the, or like Spawn of the Slithus, and like these like really bizarre westerns that, you know, only were ever released on VHS. Like one is called like Don't Cry for Me, Billy, that's starring Harry Dean Stanton, and it's not available. You can't even buy it anywhere, you know, except like on the used aftermarket. And it's on YouTube in German. The German dub of it is on YouTube, but it's really entertaining and insightful. And I'm getting a lot out of it because I haven't had a new podcast in a while.
Yeah, I've seen clips from this over the years. I've seen, because they've been doing this for quite a while, haven't they? Like off and on for quite a while, right?
For like a couple years. They're on a hiatus now because he was gearing up to do the movie critic. But that, of course, you know, didn't pan out. So, you know, now that he might have the time to come back and record a new season of it. The last episode was released a year ago. So there's been a bit of a break. But hopefully they come back because I really enjoyed it. But that does it for our show today. We're not quite sure what we're going to be reviewing next because we're at the mercy of my local AMC. And, you know, like what is available, you know, we might have to get creative in what we select. And we've been skunked quite a few times lately. So we're going to avoid teasing anything. But my minisode next week is going to be diving into the weird world of like TikTokified drama content. Specifically and it's all app based stuff like ShortMax. And if you've heard of that, you might know exactly what I'm going to be getting into. And if you have no clue, you're going to wish you didn't know by the time I'm done. But we're going to do it anyway, because it's been a preoccupation of mine researching it and trying to understand the appeal. But as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Matt, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. See ya.